Um, so plant sap analysis. I tried to not put the sap tissue testing in there because it almost invariably confuses somebody. Um, we're all set with that good because I'm trying to do it wrong every time. Plant sap analysis. It's relatively new to North America. Uh, Probably championed most by Don Kemp and eventually agriculture. They kind of got the ball rolling, I would say probably about 2010, and started getting a lot of people sending it overseas to Nova Crop in Netherlands. We started doing it 2014, simply because we were working with growers and they were wasting 7 to 10 days on tests that they needed immediate turnaround time to make it practical. And our background with mobile laboratories and environmental, we were used to getting data to a client in 15 minutes off of mass spectrometers and ICP-MSs so that they could guide cleanup. We were like, well, we could do this here. We just didn't know the interpretation, which is the big struggle for everybody else in this whole industry. So that's how we got going with this whole thing. And we brought it to North America, and now we're specialized in it. So Corey and Gary asked me to bring this to you guys and talk about how we can collaborate together. Because what I'm not going to do today is tell you how to sample, and that's the intellectual property that we don't share. I'll tell you how to analyze a SAP sample if you can come up with how you want to do it. You won't want to do it unless you could start really specializing in it because it will screw up every instrument that you own, that you put it on. And then interpreting it because everybody that you sell it to is going to want you to tell them what it means. And you need to understand. And that becomes the next juncture. Okay. But I'm very happy. We want to elevate this science. Okay. So it's about collaboration, innovation, and moving this forward. What are we talking about with SAP analysis? Because there are multiple labs that are in the United States and worldwide that say that they do SAP analysis. Even the difference between us and NovaCrop that say we're both doing SAP analysis, but we aren't analyzing exactly the same thing. Okay. When we say we're doing SAP analysis, we're talking about the fluids that are in the vascular bundle of the leaf and petiole. We are not looking at the fluids that are in the mesophilic cells. We're not looking at endophilic cells. We are staying away from that. Okay. So that's where the difference between how you remove the fluids from the petiole and the leaf blade make a big difference. And what the data is going to look like when you get done. Okay. So we want to look at what's in the SAP analysis. It's the blood test. It's what that plant took up that day in the xylem and repartitioning through the plant in the phloem, and what's going on photosynthetically, metabolically, and how as well as it converting simple nitrogen forms of nitrate and ammonia over into complete amino acids and proteins. On the left-hand side is photographs of SAP that we've expressed at our lab. Okay. Now, on the right, we've also done this at our lab, but this comes out of what we call the dungeon. Okay. This is where, when we started doing it back in 2014, and the naysayers, the people that were pointing fingers at us saying, well, they're not doing it right. They do this, they do that. And we knew it wasn't what we were doing, but we wanted to figure out what did that actually do? How did it change nothing? Okay. And so on this side, what we've done is you've actually masticated the tissue, you've ground it up, and then you put it in 50 mLs of water. Okay, so you're doing a leaf extract. You're extracting the sap fluids out of the leaf matter into a reagent or aliquot of, here it's DI water. Okay, and then you analyze that. There's a lot of labs that are doing some fun. This requires a lot less leaf matter But now you're getting into the fluids that are in the waste vacuole, getting into the cellular fluids that are taking into account osmotic balancing within the leaf plate. So your potassium is higher, your phosphorus is higher. You have to take that into account. It doesn't mean that the data is not usable. It's just different. So now, if we've got growers that use NovaCrop and they look at ours, the numbers aren't exactly the same. We have to explain why they're not the same. Okay. If you look at manganese uptake is rapidly moved out of the xylem flow. It's not flowable, it's only xylem, it's where it goes, it stays. But 85% of that manganese is quickly moved out of the xylem flow and goes almost completely into the waste basket. Dry tissue will account for it. That's why there's often a large amount of manganese in the dry tissue, very little in SAP, but there's often more in NovaCrop because they're going to masticated the tissue in some way, shape, or form. And so it gets accounted for and extracted out where ours might not. So a little bit different. Not everything we're looking at is always the same. That's typically a visual representation of what you're going to see on a SAP report from us. What are we looking at? 21 different nutritional parameters. Visual comparison between new leaf and old leaf concentration. So this is comparative SAP analysis. The new is in the light green, the old is in the dark green. That's where the power of plant SAP analysis comes from. Okay.
That's from sampling different parts of the plant at the same.
Correct. So let's take a corn plant. If we're looking at a B10, B8, B10, B8 corn, we're looking at the newest leaf that is fully formed, it's opened up, it's fully collared. That's our new leaf. We want the center 6 inches of that leaf. We're going to come up from the bottom of the corn stalk to the oldest leaf that's still viable. We want the center section of that. We want 80 grains of new. We want 80 grains of old from that field. That makes a pair. All SAP analysis, typically we do it in pairs because that's where the power is. Okay, we can do a one-off. We can do just new, which would make it look like dry tissue. Dry tissue looks at just kind of new leaf, new growth. Pair gives us the power. Okay, because in SAP analysis, it's less important that this number fits into some range that we've created to say this is an optimal range. Okay, that's what that stands for up there, optimal level. There's no such thing. I don't care. I don't care about sufficiency ranges in dry tissues either because they're all BS. You ask me. There's not enough research done to make those things actual and factual, and it doesn't apply. Okay, but I will tell you that number right there, this crop in its growing condition and its growth stage, that crop wants to be at least that level, 288 parts per million of uptake of phosphorus. Okay, and it's not getting enough through its root system. And so what it's doing is it's pulling phosphorus out of the old tissue to feed its demand. That's the power of plant SAP analysis. So we know that we're deficient in uptake, not necessarily supply. This is not about how much is in the soil. This is about how much the plant can take up. This is a report card. This is about how well your crop is doing. Okay, it's how well it's taking the money out of the bank account, do what you want to do, which is produce corn or soybeans or almonds or avocados or macadamia nuts. Okay, and when this is in deficiency, you may not even see that in the crop, but we can see it in the SAP analysis. Now when we flip this upside down, you see this is in red. That's a deficiency. We'll tell you you're at 52% deficiency. If you flip it upside down, where you've got more in the old than you do in the new, you've got excess. Your crop is taking up more than it needs, It will not allow that to go into the sink, the critical sink. It will shunt the excess to the old tissue. The old tissue is the source. Forrest Marshner talks about the source sink in higher in nutrition for higher plant. That's what we're talking about here. Source sink relationship. Okay. So anything that's flow mobile is going to have this relationship. So that's where we're going with this. We also have some physiological indicators that we look at. Total sugar production, bricks, pH, EC, and then down here we look at all of our nitrogen form, ammonia, nitrogen from ammonia, nitrogen from nitrate, total nitrogen, and then we calculate nitrogen conversion efficiency, which is basically looking at how much unconverted nitrogen we have in simple form relative to the total nitrogen. Because we want, in the 24-hour period, we want that plant converting over those simple forms over into amino acids and proteins. And if it's not, that crop is becoming a big target for sap-sucking pests. Okay, so if it's not doing that, there's a problem nutritionally, and we can fix that. Usually, sulfur, mag, phosphorus, micronutrients. So you've got someplace to go with the grower to say, hey, we can fix this. SAP analysis differ from traditional tissue testing. It's immediate insight into what's going on in that day. It's not mass balancing. You cannot do mass balancing with this. Okay, this is what it's being taken up. Yes, sir, do you have a question?
Yes. Going back to the bottom.
Yeah.
So you're showing an efficiency there.
Yep.
You take once more boxes.
Yep.
What are the possible causes?
Very possible. The biggest possible causes here is that I typically run into. One, the pH in the rhizosphere for that crop is outside the proper pH for phosphorus. Either too high, and therefore the phosphorus that's in the soil is binding up with calcium, therefore not plant available. It's too low, and now it's binding up with aluminum or iron. So it's not plant available. It's present in the soil, but not plant available. Two, it can be plant available, but if it's, and it's not so much here in this one, we do have a 47% excess in chloride. Now, that's not a significantly large chloride. In your Mulder chart, we have imbalances in soil. If the same things going on in the plane. Okay, so if the anions, think of the anions in your cations as buckets. You can only fit 100 golf balls in that bucket. You have to have a balance between all the anions that have to be like balanced. If the crop is taking up too much chloride or too much nitrate, it will inhibit its ability to take up phosphorus and not fit it in. What we see often is crops that have way too much fluoride uptake or way too much nitrate, and now the plant is inhibited from taking up phosphorus. It's there, it's physiologically available, crop cannot take it up, at least through the root system. So what we end up having to do is we let the growth, we formulate with the grower, put on foliar phosphorus. You have to find another infiltrant onto the hive. Foliar is typically that bad. Action-oriented, it enables quick, targeted nutrient adjustments, real-time process. SAP analysis is very good for crop efficacy. You do a SAP analysis in front of an application, a nutrient application. 2 days after, go back and do another SAP test. If the product is working, you will see the movement in the SAP test. We've had research groups such as CropSmith with Tim, with foliar. I know one foliar potassium test that was done here in Michigan. 4 hours after application, we start seeing the potassium move already in the SAP analysis. We marked that over 48 hours. So it's very rapid, it's very sensitive to the movement in SAP. Yeah, of course.
So on that,
the real-time blood test kind of thought pattern around this, how fast do you have to be prepared to interpret results and take the next step, right? Because it almost becomes outdated after 4 or 5 days.
That's true. Yeah. We turn every sample within 20 weeks. That's our goal. Turn it within 24 hours of time we receive. Now, ideally for our growers and our management companies, that's the other side. If you're going to use it, be prepared to have a company that can respond with you to have products for you to use. That if I'm talking to growers, that's part of it. You know, if you've got to wait 2 weeks to get a product to respond to the data that you're collecting, you go pick it up. You need to find somebody else to help you out. Yeah, it's not going to work. But we have growers. We have distributors in South America, Australia, and Eastern Europe sending stuff to us, and they take about 6 days for them to get the sample to us, for us to analyze it and get them data back. Most of that is tied up in them shipping it to us and getting it to customs here in the United States. But we've had really good success with that kind of stuff. Our Australian distributor is through the use of this and some of the product, the folder product that they've been able to design for this, they've increased not the yield on macadamia trees by 110%. So it's very high sensitivity. You know, when we're talking about nitrogen detection on plant tissue, we're talking in that 1 to 5% range. Here we're talking about nitrogen in the 500 to 3,000 ppm range. So, you know, I was talking with Greg yesterday, our sensitivity, we have to be down to that lower range. And, you know, sometimes we're trying to distinguish on something maybe on like citrus sap, or citrus from sap from citrus trees, that nitrogen level in the sap is very, very close to where our plant wants. So we have to be very critical about what's going on with that. How SAP analysis enhances crop yield. It's nutrient balance for crop health. Nutrient density. Nutrient density is a big thing in ag right now. It's getting bigger. Sustainability, reducing nutrient applications, in maintaining yield, increasing nutrient density within the foods that we're consuming, that's being fed to the livestock that they're producing, so that the food, the meat that they're producing is actually more nutritious for us. Well, that's another piece. Enhanced crop quality. So those are the key points that are coming up right now that's pushing a lot of this. Regenerative agriculture is pushing a lot. Complete the picture. You know, SAP analysis is not a silver bullet. I'm not here, nor am I telling anybody nationwide that SAP analysis is here to replace soil tests, dry tissue tests, any of this. It's part of the toolbox. Okay. You can't do mass balancing with SAP analysis, but you have to use dry tissue in that conjunction with figuring out your mass balancing for a field. Soil tests, Mallet 3. We do some Mallet 3. If I do 500 Mallet 3s in a year, that's a lot. That's not my forte. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do a $15 soil test. You know, when I do Mallet 3, I charge $35. No one's going to send me 10,000 soil tests, you know. These things work together. We have our own soil test that goes very hand in hand with SAP tests. It's more like a saturated paste, but it's a water soluble test. It's all about what nutrients are water soluble in the day that you collect the SAP that goes hand in hand. It's like a 5-to-1 BC test, is really what we're doing there. SAP tests, real-time nutrients, link to supply uptake, early warning signs, immediate feedback loops, growth stage specific, and variety specific. Each genetics feeds differently. And so now a lot of the breeders are starting to talk to us about learning the difference between this hybrid of corn versus that hybrid of corn. And when we show that this hybrid requires more potassium and phosphorus and nitrogen to produce the same yield as this one over here, that becomes pretty powerful when we start showing growers, because why do they want to buy that hybrid and take twice as much and to pay to produce the same yield? But nobody's been able to show that before. Biostimulants. We didn't have a way to really show that biostimulants were actually doing anything until we could show that they opened up a pathway. Here's a corn example. You can see here, big excess in sulfur and chloride, probably inhibiting that uptake in phosphorus here in this BA corn. You can see this is a really, this is typical in almost 90% of SAP analysis. We're deficient in micronutrients. Micronutrients are being underapplied in almost all agriculture today and horticulture. When we start pushing our growers to increase micronutrients, we are watching the Brix levels go up. We are seeing improved yields over and over and over again. Once the Brix numbers start moving, you can see those Brix numbers at 2.9 and 3. We're telling our growers, and if you ever listen to Dr. Thomas Dijkstra, that minimum, the minimum on that Brix needs to be about 6. Once you get from 6 to 8, the crop is not digestible. The sap in that crop is not digestible by 8 of the Brix. So it goes someplace else. If you can get from 8 to 10, it is not digestible by corn borers, chewing grubs, beetles. You get from 10 to 12, grasshoppers and locusts can no longer digest that plant. So now we're reducing the use of pesticides and herbicides. And I know I saw you, Dustin, you're not buying that.
I don't understand how sugar is not that.
The gut of the aphids and thrips cannot digest it. It's too hot. But keep in mind, Brix is not all sugar. Brix is the percent of dissolved solids in solution. So 1% sugar equals 1 degree Brix. Okay. But if I put 1,000 ppm of chloride onto a Brix refractometer, I get a 0.5 degree Brix. So nutrient density in the sap increases Brix. Secondary metabolite increases Brix. Glycine increases Brix. Not all to the same proportion, but they all add in. So as the plant starts producing more and more secondary metabolites and the hormones and different things, the Brix keeps going up. And that's where the plant starts becoming self-defending. It goes from what I call being in ICU, where we have to keep it alive, being self-sustaining. Okay? Yes?
You talk about that bottom measurement, I don't know what that's describing.
Yeah. So this is our nitrogen conversion efficiency. So that's something I came up with to just give the growers a visual representation of the proportion of nitrogen and in nitrate and ammonia relative to the total nitrogen in the sap. Okay, so what you do, well, all that is it taking the N is ammonia and the N is nitrate, add that together, divided by the total N, and then subtract that from 5. Okay, we know that we want to see that at 80% or better. If it falls below 80%, your photosynthesis and nitrogen conversion efficiency are suffering. That's usually going to be, then we tie that back to magnesium and sulfur. Those are your two macros that add to that. If you look at the nitrogen conversion pathway, your micronutrients are going to be boron, copper, iron, manganese, moly, and zinc. Unless you're using urea, then you have to have nickel. And then the last stool, last leg of that stool is phosphorus. And almost everybody's suffering with phosphorus. But phosphorus obviously is the energy source in every cellular function. If you don't have enough energy, the plant will make choices, like in any economy, as to what's going to cut back on. So, yes, sir.
Is it cool then that the whole tissue without that?
I actually see it the other way a lot of times. Yeah, just a little bit upside down, but it's at 87%. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I think the biggest issue here, the biggest problem with this one right here is that we've got a real problem here with uptake in magnesium. That yellow, the red and the blue is real clear. You either have a deficiency or you have an excess. Yellow's problematic. The yellow says that the uptake of that element is so poor that the rule of thumb that I gave you about reading mobile nutrients, that if young is higher, is lower than the old, that you have an excess, and if it's higher than the old, you have a deficiency. When it's yellow, that means the uptake of that element is so poor, you have to throw that interpretation out the window, and you have to start looking at why it's so poor. What's going on here? Because it's now this value, the value of the new, is not even reaching 70% of the lowest part of the uptake rate. And now we've got problems in what interpreting. It can be clouded that person.
I often getting here with the map. That luxury
Yeah.
assumption.
That's luxury surplus. That's a surplus money.
Yeah.
Not so much that the total nitrogen. My theory on this right now, with some work coming out of Israel, is that it's not so much that the total nitrogen is the problem, because their nitrates have been completely virgil. Okay, so that won't bother the phosphorus. My concern with excess total nitrogen is that work coming out of Israel is that when we over apply nitrogen, when the plant has too much nitrogen, it inhibits the sequestration or the absorption of carbon. So when we're over applying nitrogen, we may actually be hindering our whole new movement in agriculture to absorb carbon. And when we look at, our goal with sugar, the plant is supposed to be producing sugar because that's what it's built off of, glucose, canes, and starches. Well, the over application of nitrogen, which costs us money, is actually hindering what we're trying to achieve in photosynthesis, which is the absorption of carbon and carbon chain molecules. So I think, that's one of the big things with my growers is I'm trying to say, hey, let's stay nitrogen neutral, if not a little bit on the underside. So from plus to minus 10%, we're going to say that that's instrument noise and they're sampling error. Okay? Because we can't take out into effect how they make errors with sampling. When you get from minus 10 to minus 20, you got to know the field. Are we in a field that tends to drag, and therefore we're going to tend to go towards the deficiency? Once you're at negative 20, that's a deficiency. Got to act on. And then, of course, you have to know where you are in the growth state. Some growers, if they don't own the field, they do not want to leave one dime of nutrients in that soil at the end of the season. So them going to a negative on R4, R5 corn, that's fine with them. They'll strip everything they possibly can out. If they own the field, what we're trying to figure out is, genetically, how can we get more out of corn? We know that corn can set in here every single week. Well, the fastest way for us to increase yield is to set 2 years or 3 years. We can triple, double yield. This is where we want to start to be able to explore that. Problem is, in agriculture, we're great at figuring out production, but we got more production than we can sell right now. That's the problem with price. Here's soybeans. Soybeans are typically not being spent well. I'll tell you that right now. Soybean SAP analysis, people are throwing them out there just to scavenge nutrition, but they're typically not. Maximum. Let's put it that way. Okay. Here's canola at R1, same thing, different proportions. And the OL, the optimal ranges, are unique for every species. And within the species that have different growth state, reproductive, vegetative, something like corn, we have 7 different growth stages that we look at. Something like sugar beets, we have 1. So that's that nitrogen conversion efficiency, and just pointing out where all those different nutrients come into play and why they're important. If corn goes into transrespiration from transpiration, we'll see it in the sap, because all of a sudden the ammonia goes way up. And so now what's going on, the crop is shut down. It's no longer you know what I'm talking about. It's shut down, so it's feeding on itself. The plant never stops feeding. But the question is whether it's feeding from what it's supposed to, or if it's tearing itself apart. Okay. So if it's tearing down nitrogen in older tissues to feed either the ear development or the growth point, it's got to tear down the protein and it moves it as ammonia. So if you see a big kick up in your ammonia, that's what's going on. SAP capabilities. This kind of just goes into what we do and how we can collaborate with that. Because I think that's kind of what Corey was asking me to do. We work with over 85 species today. Anything that you're growing in the United States, we've got optimal levels for. We work with it. We're working with tropical species from Australia, mangoes, macadamias, avocados, bananas, sugarcane, you name it. We work with cannabis, both hemp and marijuana. We've got the biggest database on cannabis out there to anybody. We're partnering with 12 different universities and colleges nationwide right now. We work with NASA on nutrient uptake in SAP from lunar and Martian soils, looking at whether or not we can actually put establishments in Mars and Moon, and whether or not those things will be edible. About over 2,500 plant SAP clients worldwide right now. We collaborate with 8 other laboratories for things that we don't do, and that send stuff to us for SAP analysis. So there are things that, because we're now specializing specifically with plant SAP analysis, I just don't have room to do everything else. So, like you guys are talking about compost, I'm not going to deal with compost. And when we used to, we won't anymore. We just don't. So we still contact that out. Because we're now so narrowly focused into what we're doing. We do basically food safety, microbiology, we use wastewater, drinking water for irrigation, and SAP and soil, but only our rapid soil. Really, pretty much our rapid soil, which is the water extractable stuff. These are our distributors. Don't know if you guys have ever thought about this for your lab. This is something I came up with 5 years ago. These are all they're all basically amendment companies. They pre-buy my analyses in bundles, chunks, and then they can resell these to their clients. But the only way they get discounts is if they pre-buy it from me. When there's no such thing as a volume discount that they might be. They only get a discount from me if they pre-buy it. They get a discount, and let's say if they're a national distributor, they buy 1,000 at a time. They prepay me, it goes into my liability, and then we take it out of there as they use it. If they don't, if they decide to walk away after a year and a half, 2 years, it moves out of my liabilities and they expire. But this has worked out real well. Some of these are overseas. Balanced Crop Solutions in Australia. These are all the countries worldwide that we work with today. We still turn everything around in 24 hours. We will do the same thing for any of you guys. We will customize your report. Your report will have your logo on it. So, along with ours. Sorry to say that, but here's an example. And tell me if my time's up. So I don't want to kill anybody, but these are some extra logos. This is an example of the aphid issue with bricks. Okay, so this is a client from California, large, organic broccoli field. They were going to lose this field. It was so infested with aphids that they were debating whether they were just going to plow it under. Okay. In the 2022, in December of 2022, this was their bricks numbers in the new and the old. This was their sugar in the new and the old. With the SAP numbers, we changed their feed formula with one of our distributors. We changed the way they were fertigating, elevated the bricks in both the new and the old, elevated the sugar production in the new and the old. It disappeared. They were able to harvest a profitable crop out of this field. That's just an example from California. This was, like I said, broccoli. This is a distributor up in Idaho. 2 different years, balancing out chloride. They use a lot of compost on these potato fields. Problem with compost that we're seeing, not all compost is made the same. A lot of it comes from animal agriculture, and it's super high chloride. And chloride creates a problem. We're working a lot with trying to get chloride down, and a lot of problem is that water quality out west is not being good. So we're putting on pounds of chloride with irrigation water as well. So going from 1 year to the next, we were able to increase our phosphorus uptake and our sulfur uptake by reducing the chloride. And then this is a trend line example. This is the Amish that we work with quite a bit. Tomatoes are about the only thing they're making money on anymore. We've got Amish growers pretty much across the country. Their big fear is they worry about calcium because they don't want blossom at rot. So they throw a bunch of calcium thiosulfate on in their greenhouse. The problem is they put on so much calcium that it blocks out their potassium. And they're over applying calcium. There's just too much. And so they can't get the potassium up. And so what we've done here, we're trend line the SAP data throughout the entire season. SAP analysis is not a one-off. It's every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, the growers are sending in these pairs. Some guys do it every week once they start getting addicted to it, or late, but I shouldn't say it's all guys. Yeah, but you can see that as they reduce their calcium, and their calcium gets tighter, all of a sudden their potassium, the potassium in the new is in the solid, the potassium in the old is dotted. If the new is higher than the old, that meant you had a deficiency. Okay, because the new is higher in concentration than the old, so the deficiency. So when you graph it out, to the solids above the old dotted, you've got a deficiency going on. Well, when they reduce the amount of calcium, you see the deficiency starting sliding down. What we really want to see is this come down below here, because that would have improved. It's going to improve their fruit fill, and it's going to improve their shelf life. So this is the kind of stuff that we do all the time. We're working towards probably going to a online data analytics, which won't help the shot at all. But then that's it. That's my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me. Any questions? Well, yes, sir.
So how do you determine this person? I think the percent on these guys is.
So you're talking about whether or not it's not taking up enough? Yeah. So again, it's a lot of it has to do with if it's slow and mobile, it's easy to see whether it's not taking it up, right? So because it's that relationship between the new and the old. So if Like in this situation here with the magnesium, the plant wants to be here. The plant's telling you where it wants to be. Your best consultant is the crop itself on flow and mobile nutrients. Okay, so it will tell you where it wants to be. So when it's sufficient, so like on this potassium or this magnesium, it's telling you at that growth stage where it wants to be. Okay, and it's putting all the extra into the old tissue. When it's deficient, like this phosphorus up here, this is a little bit more difficult, okay? Because we don't know if this is actually where it wants to be or this is the best it can get by what it's stripping out of the old, okay? So if we start applying more phosphorus, getting more phosphorus into this crop, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to fill out, take and put as much into the new growth point or the critical sink first. So let's say we start applying phosphorus here. This will go to where it wants to be first. And then it'll start backfilling into the old. Okay? And then it'll fill the old up to match where the new is at its optimal level. So as we continue to work on an optimal level design and continue, we're constantly, every year, we're revisiting our databases. All of our databases are only developed off of flow and mobile news, for one. And then we only look at crops that are field scouted with vigor scores for us of 4 and 5. Anything that's in deficiency, we don't use in optimal level determination. So these are all things that we're constantly working on. We're working on trying to figure out drift scores for SAP analysis right now. That one boggles my mind a little bit, but I'm still working on that one. So anybody got some ideas on that, I'd be more than happy. We do use, I use calcium, the potassium to calcium ratios a lot because calcium is mobile. So what I would do here is I've got 2 pieces that I can use in calcium. I've got my optimal range that I've set. I'm not a big fan of it. It's there. I don't like it a ton. I do like to make sure that my potassium to calcium ratio stays. I'd like to see it between 4 and 3. Okay. Now, then what I do is I look at my potassium and make sure, is my potassium satisfied? If my potassium satisfied, well, no, because my crop's telling me it's satisfied. Then I go back to my potassium to calcium ratio. Now you can see that potassium ratio right there is 5. I'm satisfied. That tells me that my calcium in my new isn't really up to where I'd like to see it. I'd like it to be a little bit higher so that this comes down to 4. Okay. So
All right.